Hey everyone, my name is Mike Vaughn. Welcome to GVN Interviews. I am so pleased to announce our very special guest, Pete Atkins. He is the writer of some of the best Hellraiser films, full stop. Hellraisers 2 through 4 and Wishmaster, and just a lot of amazing books, just fantastic.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. That was, I should quit while I'm ahead. That's, thank you very much. Lovely to be on the show. Lovely to talk to you. And thank you for the kind intro.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just, this is such a blast because I am such a big fan of your work and not only just the Hellraiser movies, but as I said, the literature that you write and like Wishmaster, I think is pretty awesome. So it's
Oh, thanks.
yeah. So diving right in, so you actually knew Clive Barker fairly early on, like since the 70s, is that right?
Do I look that old, Mike? Yes. Yeah, the answer to both questions is yes. Yeah, we met. People tend to shorthand it as old school friends. I didn't actually, Clive and I didn't know each other in high school. We met literally my last year of high school and his last year of college.
Mm.
So, which was 1974. Because yes, folks, we are that old. Doug Bradley, who of course you all know as Pinhead, went to the same school as Clive. I lose track. Doug's a year older than me and 2 years younger than Clive, but they were at the same high school. So technically they were high school friends. And I met them just afterwards. So yeah, long time now. It's 48 years.
Wow.
Oh, well, now I'm depressed.
Well, you do not look it, so
Well, God bless you, you lying silver-tongued devil.
um so yeah, I think it's so interesting. You of course wrote the screenplay for the second Hellraiser film, but I'm kind of curious, were you I guess you were kind of around and friends with Clive while he was writing Hellraiser and then directing
Oh,
it.
sure.
Um were you actually like there when he was filming some of that, or
I mean, I visited the set as a friend, yeah, but I mean, just in case there's any lack of clarity, I had nothing to do with Hellraiser other than it was a movie being made by my friends. I mean, just for the background, and I know some of your viewers, I'm sure, who are more hardcore Hellraiser people will know this, so I apologize for the repetition. But Clive, Doug, and I, all three of us, when I met them in 1974, they'd already been doing some work in theatre. I joined them and we formed a theatre company called The Dog. It wasn't originally called The Dog Company. We ended up with that name, so it's how everybody tends to refer to us. So we'd worked together for 10 years in fringe theatre. The fringe theatre in England is the equivalent of off Broadway.
okay.
Like none of us were getting paid, that's what we mean. So yes, I'd been a friend and professional colleague of both Clive and Doug for more than a decade before Hellraiser, but I had nothing to do with Hellraiser other than saying, yeah, looks good. You're doing well, fellas.
Yeah, and it kind of must have been amazing to sort of be able to like more or less sort of take over the reins as far as the sequel and like shaping as far as honestly, I love the first one, and it's like I never want to take away from that, but like I think the second one is probably my favorite.
I knew I
um
liked you, Mike. I knew I liked you. No, I mean, that's very kind. And let me just say for the record that as in most areas of endeavor, the original is still the greatest, because without the first Godfather, you don't get Godfather 2. Without Frankenstein, you don't get Bride of Frankenstein. And the reason I pointedly mention Godfather 2 and Bride of Frankenstein is that they are routinely cited as examples of where the sequel, you know, might be as good as, or in some people's opinion, actually, in my opinion, Bride of Frankenstein is definitely superior to Frankenstein. I love them both. And people have been really kind over the years. It does seem that people are genuinely fond of Hellbound, almost as much as, and in some cases, in people with the most impeccable taste, such as yourself, Mike, they actually might prefer. I'm happy that people. I'm happy that people still watch this crap after 30 years. You know, it's fantastic that people are still into it.
It must, I mean, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but like with the new Hellraiser, but I mean, it must be just so amazing to sort of help create something or be a part of that legacy that still really like soldiers on, that is still being talked about, written about.
Yeah, I feel very lucky, very blessed, and very grateful that because I realize now it's a thing you'll realize as you move decade to decade and age. 30 years doesn't feel as long as 30 years used to feel. But I realized that the Hellraiser movies and Wishmaster's only 25 years old, but those movies for horror fans in the teens and 20s are definitely as old as the Hammer movies were when I was a kid, and almost as old as some of the later Universal movies were when I was a young Famous Monsters of Filmland reading film geek. So yeah, it's wonderful that people still like this stuff, and I'm not only sort of personally grateful that they like it, but it's very moving to me to feel that we've somehow become part of that sort of torch passing tradition, because I am a card carrying horror nerd. Bought my first issue of Famous Monsters when I was 8 years old. I don't know if people even. Famous Monsters was the Fangoria of the 60s, the 1960s, excuse me, and into the 70s. And it was the Bible for all of us. So, yeah. Sorry, that's a very rambling answer to your question. But
yeah,
it's great. It's great that people still like this stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. It's so funny because, like, for example, you know, I don't know if you watch or know Rick and Morty, that show, very much, but they
sure.
Did you see that last season they did a whole Hellraiser?
I haven't seen it yet. I mean, a lot of people sent me links, and but you know, I'm old. I like to. I don't want to hit the link on the laptop. I want to go and watch it on the TV. So it's on my list. But
oh, yeah, listen, you're talking to somebody that likes analog as well.
Sure. Well, because you have them, you own them. Yeah. It's like, don't trust the streamers. They will get rid of their library. And don't get me wrong, streaming's fantastic. It's so fabulous to just have access to, I can find this. But if you want to be sure you've got a movie, yeah. Or a record, you know, same deal, music and movies and print books. Let's keep physical media alive, but let us enjoy the benefits and ease of the streaming universe.
I was going to say, not to be shameless, but, you know, us authors, I feel like have to be a little shameless. That's my book.
Oh, great.
But, I mean...
what's the image on the cover? Was that posed for the cover, or is it from something?
That is something that we workshopped with the publisher.
Fabulous.
I would love to know who the model is, because it's amazing. It's such an amazing.
It's great.
But yeah, this whole tome, this wouldn't be possible without analog movies, because a lot of this stuff was hard to find.
Sure.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious. Were you able to see the new Hellraiser movie yet?
Oh, the movie? No, not yet. No, I've only seen. I mean, I'm a complete civilian as far as it goes. I've seen what you guys have seen. I've seen the initial images. I've seen the trailer. I gather there's a second trailer just dropped. I haven't seen that yet. Is it? Do we see a lot more? Or?
Yeah, a good bit. I think they show more of the new Cenobites and
Cool.
yeah, so I got to cover it and I actually got to see it. So it's
Oh, well, you tell me. How is it?
yeah, I really liked it. If I'm being completely honest, I think they were a little bit safe with it, but I
Yeah,
really enjoyed it.
cool.
Like overall, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my fingers are firmly crossed and my thumbs are very ready to be up. The writers, Luke Petrowski and Ben Collins, and the director David Bruckner, that same team did the Night House. I don't know if you saw that
Oh
movie.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, pretty good, right?
Yeah.
So I am, I'm on their side. And also, they've been very nice to me. Luke and Ben and I follow each other on Twitter, and whether they were lying or not, but they made all the right noises about, oh, we looked only at the first four movies. We wanted to live up to them, which was, heartwarming. But so yeah, I'm psyched for them. Because who wants somebody to make a bad movie anyway? I'm surprised at how many Hellraiser fans seem to want it to fail, which is crazy. They've been bitching for years that they've only made these shitty micro budget direct to video sequels. And now, first of all, Clive has some of the rights back. So he's back as an executive producer. So they should be supporting him. And secondly, there's a budget and a marketing campaign. So, wouldn't we rather there was a good movie?
Oh yeah.
And Jamie looks fantastic as Pinhead. We're not allowed to say Pinhead anymore. I'm too old to get used to the Hell Priest. Sorry, Clive.
I was gonna say she referred in the I had some cool things to tell you about the press conference actually, but
oh yeah,
but to lead up into that, I know Jamie's referred to her as Pinhead, so I think
great,
yeah.
great.
But the cool thing is, and I made sure to take some notes for this. Whenever I did the press conference, I think it was about a week ago. I hope I'm saying this name right. Goran Vinich, who plays Voight.
I don't know any better than you. I thought it was Visnich, but
Oh yeah, okay.
I don't know either.
Yeah, I
God
think
bless
you're
him.
right.
I remember him from ER or Grey's
Yeah.
Anatomy, one of them. So he looks great. Is he good in the movie?
Oh, he's excellent. But he
Yeah.
actually said that Bloodline is his favorite.
What a strange choice, but that's great. Very nice.
Yeah,
Perhaps he's good friends with Adam Scott and just wanted to
oh.
because we launched Adam's career,
Yeah.
Hellraiser Bloodline was.
I have to say while we're talking about that, like looking back now at like baby Adam Scott with that like flowing
yeah, right.
very much of a choice of a hairdo, it kind of cracks me up.
Yeah. As I'm sure you and the serious Hellraiser fans know, Bloodline was a mixed experience for those of us on the OG franchise. So I haven't gone back and looked at the thing. I remember the wigs more than the actual hair, but I guess he was Jacques, the assistant to the Duke de Lille, the magician. But yeah, I guess because he's only a servant for the most part, it's just the fabulous au naturel hair. Yeah.
He's great in it. And then I also noted that Odessa, who plays Riley in the film, expressed how much she loves Hellbound and thinks that's her favorite one. So
well, I'm fonder than ever of these people now. This is now I'm thrilled that the movie's getting attention, and yeah, I hope it's great, and I hope it does great.
Yeah, I think it is really good. I think like it's maybe one of the most visually stunning maybe since the second one, because
right, okay, great.
they really do pay attention to just that, these, especially like, the early Hellraiser movies has such a rich kind of visual language.
Yeah, obviously, I wrote such rich descriptions in the screenplay. They had to bring no. Also, no disrespect to the people who made the less expensive sequels. Of course, none of the first four movies were in any way what we would call a high budget or even medium budget movie, but they did have some money. Mm. And the later sequels, which I haven't seen, but you couldn't expect them to deliver as much visual punch because they literally didn't have the budget or the schedule to do that. But in the end, it's about the creatives and what they can do with the resources they have. But I noticed in the trailer, very briefly, but our baby Leviathan is back. So I don't know how much time we spend in the labyrinth in the new one, but I did see Leviathan spinning there briefly and felt, it's my baby.
And I was trying to pay extra attention because they get very, very, very close to Christopher's score, like that iconic.
Sure.
Oh man, one of the coolest things was I got to tell Christopher Young just that I think his Hellraiser scores is maybe some of the best horror scores maybe ever.
I agree. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but it's fantastic. The Hellraiser, and again, I'm biased, even more so Hellbound for me. The majesty and eeriness, fantastic.
I'm kind of curious because these films have and still continue to have a big kind of presence in the LGBTQ community. Is that something that has kind of surprised you over the years, or like when you were first making that, did it seem like this was the kind of community that would embrace these kind of movies?
It certainly didn't seem like it wouldn't. There was no conscious I don't even want to use loaded words like position on this. I think when he made Hellraiser and when we were making Hellbound, Clive wasn't technically out in to the public, but I was his best friend for 15 years. So I don't know. I mean, we were entirely comfortable with any community or branch of a community that liked what we would do, like any artist should be. But it didn't strike me. I love the fact in retrospect that certainly the first movie and to some extent the first two have been claimed as an odd word because it sounds like I'm disputing the claim, which I'm not. But they've been adopted. They've been claimed in the most positive sense by that community, which is great. And of course, Clive's adventures in the gay underworld were not quite as adventurous as some of the shit that happens in the movies, but it's not like the gay BDSM clubs were not somewhat of a visual influence on. Funnily enough, the Cenobite costumes themselves, obviously Pinhead's face was Clive's original design, but the whole look and costumes goes back to the theatre days that I mentioned, that Clive, Doug and I. There was a lady, she was never actually part of the dog company, but she was like part of our artistic crowd of like-minded people. Her name was Jane Woodward, though she took the professional name Jane Wildgoose. And she designed the Cenobite look. And 10 years before that, she had designed my corset and bustier for my role as the transvestite schizophrenic killer Rainbow in one of our in a play that Clive wrote. So I guess in that sense, there's a real through line of transgressive what do I want to say? Like allied to the transgressive communities.
Yeah.
You know, right through from the plays through to the movies. So yeah, I think it's fantastic. And I know that there are some assholes now who are pulling shit with the new movie and calling it woke. And you know how could, and people are quite rightly defending and saying they've always been queer movies. Yeah. And I am on their side 100% in claiming that. I'd like to think they're not only that, but yeah. They were for everybody of every persuasion. And certainly the fact that that community felt they had something that was speaking to them and with which they could feel comfortable and at home, you know, even though it's perhaps some of the least pleasant aspects of the suffering side. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I know I've talked to other fans and like fans and slash scholars, and you know, they're like, you know, Clive Barker's movies aren't, you know, exclusively gay or straight. They're just they're an amalgamation of everything. It's like a spectrum of, you know, you can, it's almost like it lets you project what you.
Sure, yeah, I think like, that's true. I mean, Nightbreed, for example, is probably a better and more direct example where clearly the breed. I mean, again, I hate people taking a movie or a book or any work to concretize the metaphor too much and say the breed are the gay community. I mean, yeah, it's a metaphor for the gay community or any outsider community or any othered community, but certainly that movie would suggest that Clive was on the right side of the issue. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's what's so wonderful about these films. Not only the Hellraiser films, but like Nightbreed and other things like that Clive has kind of crafted. Where again, it doesn't alienate anybody. It's more about like the others getting their day, getting their celebration.
Yeah, yes, because it's like you can't necessarily label them with some of the words. The word being a cis hetero middle-aged old white guy, I'm very careful about the words I can use and the words I can't use. I know that queer has now been reclaimed as a positive and certainly is used by the community themselves. I still feel a little weird saying it because it was very much a pejorative that would be hurled at friends of mine when I was a kid. But in the context of it being reclaimed as a positive, I would say, just follow up your point. Yeah, it's not that they're gay movies or straight movies. They're queer movies. In the widest sense of queer, it's like odd shit happens here, and we don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Which, you know, so in the broadest sense of queer, I think the movies are queer movies. I think most in your face supernatural horror movies are a little queer. Yeah. I mean, even if what would you say, even if the sexual impulse in the movie is clearly heterosexual, if you know, the voluptuous female victim is both pursued by the monster and attempts to be rescued by the hero, it's still, we're in a queer world, folks. It's like everything's odd here. There are mad scientists and man-made creatures and weird shit. So yeah,
and it's so interesting. And to pull back what you were saying about Bride of Frankenstein, that's another kind of prime example of
that's a queer movie. Again, if I'm allowed to use that word, that is gloriously Ernest Thesiger's performance as Dr. Pretorius is just the quintessence of camp, and not camp in a reductionist and laugh at it way. It's like, this is high camp. This is high end, clever, witty, poised, odd
Oh
other.
yeah,
Just
it's
terrific.
polished camp to the degree of like Oscar Wilde, right to that.
Absolutely. Right, right.
Yeah, no, that's like absolutely spot on. Like it's so interesting because I think about, I like identify as queer, gender nonconforming, and
Sure.
these are the kind of movies, the Hellraiser movies, Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, even more, which kind of like really spoke to me, and in a way, it was interesting because when I was younger, I really wasn't emotionally mature enough to kind of articulate why, but then when you get a little older
Sure,
and you start
sure.
putting the
Oh, well, yeah, that's true for all. Whatever we end up pursuing romantically, we're all in that sort of unformed, open state at 11, 12, 13. Yeah, and these movies offer a little a helping hand into a place where you can both. It's not so much that you would feel less other or othered. It's like, oh, I feel very othered, and it's great.
yeah.
Because they're fascinating. I mean, I know you want to talk about the newer movies more, but I love Bride of Frankenstein on every level. And one of the things about it is that the bad guys aren't the bad guys. I mean, of course they are. Pretorius is a super villain, but it's so enticing. It's like you want. He seduces
Yeah.
Henry back into that world, and we go along. It's like, yeah, this is like, yeah, Valerie Hobson's pretty. Go marry her later, but go fuck around with this guy and his bizarre homunculi first. It's a really inviting it, and the movie itself, again, consciously or wrong, it's a movie that says, just to close the circle, this is partly why I had Ken Cranham in Hellbound. His whole thing is he wanted to know, he needs to know. And Pretorius was in the back of my head there because Pretorius just wants to poke at things and what's under here, so yeah, so it's a fine tradition. And
No, and gosh, that's so fascinating because I've always kind of thought that, lineage of Dr. was it his character is Dr. Chenard, right? Or am
right.
like I always thought that him and Pretorius had a sort of lineage, or like kind of came
Wow,
from the.
that is high praise. That's thank you.
But
That's
no,
great.
yeah, and gosh, that's so cool to actually have that confirmed because it was something I've always kind of thought about. Like, after a couple watches, I'm like, yeah, all right.
Oh yeah, no, he was completely. I shouldn't climb. People tend to climb up. Oh, it was always my intent to point out, as I'm sure you know, this shit works unconsciously as much
Yeah.
as it works consciously. So I don't know whether I thought, let's see if I can write a Pretorius here. But it's one of my favorite movies. So it was steeped in there. In fact, I used him as an example. Somebody, I'm very unliteral minded, and I hate research. And somebody who's obviously a little more literal minded and fond of research than I was asked me on some social media somewhere, not in an aggressive way, but in a sort of gotcha way, asked me whether Chenard was a neurosurgeon or a psychiatrist, because it's unusual for people to be both. A question that had never fucking occurred to me. But I wanted to answer friendlily but funnily. And I said, well, there's your problem. Chenard is neither a neurosurgeon nor a psychiatrist. He is a mad scientist in the fine tradition of mad scientists like Dr. Pretorius and Dr. Frankenfurter. He just wants to know. He wants to do shit. So,
And he
anyway.
just sometimes wants to just fuck around and find out.
Fuck around and find out. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
by the way, good for you for using the phrase that way, because I know people use it in sort of macho world as a big negative, but it's like, no, that's like a bat signal. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to fuck around and find out. Where should we fuck around?
Well, I mean, I mean, again, I think you put it so succinctly where, the Hellraiser movies are all about desire, about pushing that limit, about going somewhere you're not supposed to go, but oh, it just feels
You
great
just
doing
gotta.
it.
Well, it is.
Um,
There's a well, it's a poem and it's a play, because back in the 1920s, people were wacko enough to think that you could still write full-length dramas in verse. But there's a play by a young guy called James Elroy Flecker called Hassan. Now, these days, it's a little Orientalist in the sense that there's probably a lot of cultural appropriation going on, because it's about the way Westerners feel about the romance of the East, the romance of the Orient. But we do feel that appeal of that romance, again, partly of the other. And Hassan is a strange thing about that impulse, that Gnostic impulse to attain knowledge. And it has this couplet, which I should have looked at before I spoke to you, because then, for lust of knowing what should not be known, we take the golden road to Samarkand. And it's like, yeah, that's what drives these guys. Lust of knowing what should not be known. The very fact that it shouldn't be known, that's why they want to go and find out. That's why my other two favorite movies, Bride of Frankenstein, King Kong, and Cocteau's Orpheus, they're all about the same thing. They're all in black and white. They're all old. But the other thing they've got in common is they're all Gnostic cinema. The hero, whether it works out well or not, is taking the golden road to Samarkand, because they are possessed with the lust of knowing what should not be known. And that's like Carl Denham in King Kong is like, yeah, he's a wildlife photographer. Sure he is. He wants to go to Skull Island because it's fucking dangerous and fucking scary and full of shit you shouldn't know. Pretorius for sure. And the doomed poet hero in Cocteau's Orpheus literally falls in love with a princess from another country who is the embodiment of death. Hot death, but death. So So anything I've done that has any link with that kind of tradition, I'm very flattered to hear that. Thank you.
That's amazing, and I'm gonna have to look that up immediately after we're done talking.
Oh, you've never seen Cocteau's movie? Orpheus? Oh, it's great.
Yeah, I know I've heard I heard of it, but it's
there's always movies you haven't seen. My best friend of many years, who we lost 3 or 4 years ago, a great horror writer called Dennis Etchison. He was 72 years old when, in conversation, he mentioned he'd never seen fucking Casablanca.
Wow.
I was like, what? How is it possible? But then I realized we all have these little lacunae, and we can't see everything. And there are great classics I haven't seen, but I think you would. I mean, Cocteau, I think you'll. Again, I don't want to presume about your taste or your interest, but if you do, Cocteau was a gay man who was committed. He described himself as, "What are you? I'm a poet." Was the only answer he would give. But he was a filmmaker and a writer and a visual artist. I think I'm right. It might be different in France, his home country. The thing he's least remembered for is the poetry. But what he meant was that everything else is a subdivision of poetry. And it'll be really interesting to see what you think of Orpheus, because I think, like we were talking earlier about Hellraiser and Hellbound, overtly it's a heterosexual story in the sense that the pursuits both natural and supernatural that are going on are woman, man, man, woman. But I believe in the same way, if you can comfortably describe Clive's stuff as queer art, I think you will certainly find a brotherly spirit in the cocktail stuff.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to check that out. It definitely sounds right up my alley.
There's another movie he made 10 years later in 1960 called Testament of Orpheus, which is definitely interesting, but don't get them mixed up. The one that's an honest to God movie, with a plot, is Orpheus from 1950.
Okay.
He's the guy who made. Did you ever see the live action Beauty and the Beast, La Belle et la Bête?
Yes, the French film.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's the guy who plays the Beast, Jean Marais, was Cocteau's. Well, I don't know if it was Cocteau's boyfriend, but they certainly slept together. But I don't know if they were an ongoing couple. But he's the Beast in Beauty and the Beast, and he plays Orpheus in Orpheus.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, it's a good movie.
No, that's awesome. That is sort of the Venn diagram of all the things that I like that you described. So
well, there you go. That's it's nice when you find those things.
I know it's probably a little off topic, but we're talking about old movies, and I love old horror movies especially. Have you ever seen Mad Love, the 1935?
Oh God, yeah, of course, I love that.
Oh man, I love that. Talk about
all of it's great, and I'm probably glad that it isn't all like this. But there's one moment when Laurie is stumbling up the stairs, and you see like the radium gloves glowing, and I think he's got the shades on and that, but imagistically, it's just like, oh my God, look at that! It's it's great. It's
great. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the guy that photographed that also later would do Citizen Kane, right? Like he did like the
Is it Greg Toland did Citizen Kane? Is it him or Karl Freund? It's some German emigre, so you're definitely in the ballpark. You probably know better than I. I am not a scholar of these things.
Oh, I'm not either, really.
Yeah, no, but the guy that shot Kane, I'm going to look so stupid if I got this wrong around. I think it was Greg Toland who shot Kane, and there's no doubt at all that Kane has the look that came over on the boats fleeing the Nazis, that also informed the look of so much of, Mad Love is in a universe, MGM, I guess, Mad Love, one of the other studios. But that look, that sort of German expressionist look, is certainly something that Kane has in common with the genre.
So Greg Toland did photograph Mad Love and
Kane. Okay, great.
And I just looked it up because bless IMDb, because that's such a big help. He also did Wuthering Heights, which I forgot that he photographed. But
okay, that's the Olivier and Merle Oberon version, I guess. Yeah.
And Grapes of Wrath, yeah, gosh, Henry Fonda. Yeah, I must got the wrong Fonda.
So many of them.
Yeah. But yeah, it's just to turn this back around though. I really sort of credit like Clive Barker and as far as like films and even books and stuff like you, as far as like really shaping this like really interesting idea about like horror that can kind of be, again, transgressive, tap into that sort of taboo-ness without bringing any baggage to it. It's just like this is the party to be at.
Well, that is the best compliment you can ever be paid. So I mean, thank you for my little part in that, and well done, Clive. But yeah, I agree. This is the party to be at. Is exactly the thing. I hate worthiness, and like when people recommend, whether it's literature, music, serious music, art, whatever the hell, the thing that's supposed to be good for you, it might be. You can certainly no prejudice, no exclusion going on here. But for the most part, the good rule of thumb is, does it feel like the party you want to be at? Or are you sitting there thinking, is it a geography lesson or is it a party you want to be at? And I think, I mean, it's very kind what you're saying, Mike. And I think what you're sensing there and what we all sense when we just dig things, it's like nobody's slumming. Like nobody, well, certainly not me, certainly not Doug, certainly not Clive. I can't speak for every crew member. There might have been people in the crew who thought, oh, I wish I was filming a Jane Austen adaptation. And given we shot it at Pinewood, most of them probably did shoot some Jane Austen adaptation. But we are not slumming. You know, we're there because it's like, this is home fucking base. We love this stuff. And I hate to be condescended to, or if somebody comes along and makes a genre movie because for whatever benighted reason other than sheer unadulterated love of genre movies, fuck them. Yeah. I'm not interested. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and somebody that like I get like, especially with it being like October very soon, I'm like bombarded with like horror screeners, which, hey, I'll love that. But
oh yeah,
I can definitely tell when something's made, even if it doesn't connect with me personally, you can tell that the effort's there.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
Like you can't fake sincerity.
Sure.
Like especially, I think we're probably similar in how we're both probably pretty good bullshit detectors when it comes to stuff like that.
Oh yeah, my policy ever since people have been kind enough or foolish enough to allow me on to podcasts and radio shows and stuff, my little rule of thumb is, because I know nobody wants to make a bad movie, nobody wants to write a bad book, nobody wants to write a bad pop song. I'm full of opinions, as I'm sure you are too. And in private, I will badmouth stuff I don't like. I don't like to say anything bad in a public forum because, you know, it's real people and they might watch these things and the feelings are involved. But I have to say, without naming any names or decades, I want to be very safe. Yeah, I often look at a lot of horror movies specifically, but it's true in all fields, that I'm supposed to like, that a lot of people seem to like. And about 15 minutes in, I think, what is this crap? And it's what you say. It's the bullshit detector. It's like, this, I don't buy this.
It's so funny because it's been something that I've been like, I mean, it's something when you're like a critic, you have to kind of grapple around, because I'm a real nice guy. I don't want to, like, I don't.
You don't want to hurt people's feelings, but you got to tell the truth about what you.
Yeah, exactly. Like I want to be like, I think of it as, how can I say something that's constructive, even though it doesn't necessarily connect with my taste or sensibility?
Sure.
And you know, it's so funny though, because like I'll get filmmakers that will email me and be like, hey, you know what? I appreciate the feedback. Like, I'm sorry it didn't connect with you, but I appreciate that you did. Like a lot of times, and sometimes it's really hard.
Sure.
A lot of times I will try to find something nice to say about a movie.
Yeah, well, good for you. Right.
Well, and it's like, you know, ripping things apart isn't really my thing, especially when it's as you say, you know, you've been in the trenches with making movies. I mean, I've never made movies, but I have friends that tell me it's nearly impossible to get it. You know?
Yeah, right.
So when I go into review, I'm like, I want to come with that respect and like reverence.
Sure.
Because, you know, it's so funny because I've only written the one book, and I'm hoping my second one I can finish up. But it
Great.
it's a little, I don't know if you feel like this, but it's a little nerve-wracking because you make something and then you put it out there and then it's not really yours anymore.
Oh, they can say whatever they like.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. No, I'm partly. I don't because I don't want to sound like I'm morally superior when I say I don't like to say anything unkind about people's works. Partly that's protection because people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones.
Mm.
And maybe if I didn't write or make things, I'd feel a little freer to be a mean asshole about the people that do. But it's like, you're always aware, if you're any good, you're aware usually of the failings of your own stuff as well as the strengths. So you can be very conscious of, yeah, somebody's going to spot that. Oh, it falls apart in the middle of the second act. Um, so yeah, but yeah, you got to do what you got to do and put it out there. And it's it. I respect people who can do what you do, and that's a very nice stance to take. I'll be honest about its failings, but I'll try to be kind or at least express it gently. Which I don't know if I could do because the thing is, although I'm saying how nice I'm being, I mean, in private, I am some of the bitch fests I'll get into with friends over the phone. But did you fucking see that? Oh my God. Well, I think we all do, don't we?
Yeah.
In private, you can really say, what the hell are they thinking?
Yeah, exactly. It's just, and it's so funny because I think that now that I talk to and have friends with filmmakers and other writers and authors and stuff, it gives me that perspective of like, uh, it's probably okay to mention him, but I won't mention him by name. It's nothing bad, but like he's a film producer that does little indie horror movies, and
Mhm.
he's like, yeah, like what people don't understand when they leave these reviews is like we're like a little, indie production.
Sure.
Like we're not Marvel where you can take the critical hits. And he's like, I put a lot of my own money into this because I love it. And it just
Yeah,
it gives you that it brings, I think, I always kind of tell that story because in my mind it brings it home like crystal clear, like what the stakes are for some of these
sure,
filmmakers.
sure.
um but yeah, it's really something though with some of these. It's it's,
Sure.
but yeah, and I enjoy it. Like it's to me like I love highbrow, I love lowbrow, I love no brow. I
That's
run
I use that phrase verbatim all the time.
uh,
Actually, well, let's see if you disagree with me here. My usual stance when I try to explain my weird range of taste to people is I love highbrow and I love lowbrow. I don't like middlebrow. I
okay.
don't like bourgeois, worthy, platitudinous entertainment for the middle classes.
Yeah.
Again, I do not deny its right to exist. I wish them all well. I hope everybody makes a living, but it's never going to float my boat,
Yeah.
So you want, I don't know, what are the examples we used to use? It's like the problem is these days, what I used to use as my examples of lowbrow is now mainstream culture because of Marvel's conquest of the cinematic world. But it used to be, I'd say I like T.S. Eliot and I like Batman. I don't like the shit in the middle.
Yeah.
I like Samuel Beckett. I like Benny Hill. I
Yeah.
don't like the shit in the middle. But yeah, highbrow, lowbrow, but not
Yeah.
middlebrow so
Hmm.
much.
Okay. Yeah, I that is kind of definitely spot on how I am. I definitely love like what people consider trash. I love, I kind of see as, I don't see it really as trash. I see it as kind of
Right.
like I don't know, like it's interesting how Ken Russell used to be considered absolute like rubbish, and now we kind of see him as an auteur, like.
Oh, that's fascinating, because that just tells us something about history and the changing. You're absolutely right. But again, with the benefit of my old age, sir, let me tell you that, yeah, for a long time. But Ken fell. Ken was always a sort of enfant terrible of well, I guess he was working in TV by the late 50s even. Anyway, he started with a fairly high reputation and was taken fairly seriously. And then his reputation plummeted because of a couple of great movies he made.
Devils.
Yeah, right. Right. And now he's been resurrected. But no, that's interesting that wasn't I guess that is, one of the few advantages of age is you can see one dip in the curve further back, because he was taken, I think, pretty seriously as a mainstream art house. It was never a huge commercial success, obviously, but he was a sort of legit art house auteur, along with his generation of people that came out of. A lot of them came out of the actually, the BBC, but blanking on all the names, but your Tony Richardsons, your Ken Loaches, even your Mike Lees, although he's a little younger than them. But yeah, Ken Russell had made these sort of art biopics of composers for the BBC. I'm pulling stuff out of my ass from like 60 years ago. Pretty sure he did one on the composer Delius, and another one. And then, of course, he made big screen versions. He did The Music Lovers about Tchaikovsky, which he started getting into trouble for. And then what was the fuck? He had Roger Daltrey of The Who riding a giant cock.
Yeah, was it Listomania?
Listomania.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and at that point, again, the middle-class, middle-brow people who'd sort of tolerated his excesses in the service of biopics of Delius was like, it's Roger Daltrey and a giant cock. We can't pretend to like this anymore. And meanwhile, the rest of us are going, fucking hell, it's Roger Daltrey on a giant cock. This guy's a genius.
But yeah, no, it is really funny how like all that kind of comes around, because yeah, I mean, well, Listomania and what was it, Tommy? Like those were Warner Brothers films, right?
Yeah.
And
did
he? Sorry.
Tommy was a flop, I guess. Is that what happened? I mean, the thing is, studios, and I make no moral judgment here at all. It doesn't. We shorthand them as evil, obviously, but it's neither good nor evil. It's all sort of bottom line for them. Like, if they thought Tommy was a piece of crap, but it made money for them, Ken would still be being bankrolled by them. Usually, it's very cold, but simple bottom line issue. And I guess, big surprise, Listomania wasn't a huge hit. And I guess the Devils must have been a hit. I mean, everybody went to see it because of the controversy. Anyway, I interrupted you, Mike. I'm sorry. You were.
Oh, no, you're fine. I actually, because I was kind of curious. Tommy actually made 34 million on a 3 million budget, according to.
That's a hit. That's absolutely a hit. Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is interesting. Like, just how. And to bring this back to like Hellraiser, it's interesting how we're seeing that rise up again of popularity. And would you say that the especially the first two films are kind of seen a little bit in a more higher regard, or like in academic circles even than before?
Yeah, probably. I'm very happy to talk specifically about the stuff I was involved in, but I'm always, so I mean, you pull me right back to earth if you need, but I'm always interested in the bigger picture of these things, because our shitty, despised little genre is, like all generalizations, you can poke some holes in this generalization that I'm about to make, but it's mainly true. In their own time, they are almost universally derided by the Academy and by middlebrow media coverage. Almost without fail, 30 years later, they're on college courses, while the respectable Oscar bait movies that were made the same year are just forgotten. And actually, I shouldn't limit it just to the horror genre. Gangster movies, musicals, horror movies, science fiction to a lesser extent, maybe because that's treated, because it's got the word science in, so it's treated with a bit more respect from the get-go. But usually at the time, they are despised by the academics who think they are sneering downwards. The next generation of academics write papers on them while sneering at the equivalents that are being made while they're writing. So, yeah, I don't know how much the Academy has embraced Hellraiser and Hellbound. I do know Dr. Sorcha Flynn from Manchester. She's from Ireland, but I think it's University of Manchester. Forgive me, Doc. She's gung-ho for them. She's clearly of our tribe, who she's infiltrated enemy lines, I think, by being an academic. Yeah, I'm sure. Just like, there are now people who write serious academic. Yeah, they've always been popular, so they've always been like coffee table books about the Universal movies or the Hammer movies. But yeah, the academics take them seriously. But I'll address I think the implicit point that you were too kind to make explicit. You're saying that 1 and 2 are looked at more seriously than 3 and 4 in Hellraiser, right? Because I think you're right. I think they are. But Hellraiser 3 it's an interesting dividing line for the Hellraiser fans. I think there are people who just love the first 2 movies and regard everything after them as a big drop off. And I think there's a tonal similarity in 1 and 2 that does make them feel a little different. But whatever through line there might be because of my involvement from writing 2 and then writing 3 and 4, leave me out of it. There's no doubt that Tony Hickox, as the director of 3, brought a different look than Tony Randall. And both those Tonys are still lifelong friends of mine. I was very lucky with my directors. Most screenwriters usually have horror stories to tell. But I'm very fortunate. And Bob Kurtzman from Wishmaster 2. Wishmaster as well, not Wishmaster 2. What was I saying? Oh, that so some fans of the first 2 Hellraiser movies dismiss Hellraiser 3 as, I'm paraphrasing, sort of popcorn movie, slick movie, commercial movie. And I think without being as judgmental as them about it, I think they're right in that there's a shift, because Tony H, as opposed to Tony R, has a very slick, self-aware style with a sort of commercial sheen on it. And again, I always feel I'm talking about Tony's work here, so I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but I think people who look at Hellraiser 3 in the context of Hellraiser 1 and 2 might have reason to say, well, they don't need a reason. If they don't like it as much, they don't like it as much. But you can clearly see why there'd be a break there. But if it wasn't Hellraiser 3, if it was just technically it was 91 it was released, but it's sort of last gasp 80s. If you just look at Hellraiser 3 as an 80s horror movie, I think Tony delivered a really good looking, slick, fast moving 80s horror movie. Was it as Hellraiser-y as 1 and 2? No, I guess not, if that's your definition of what Hellraiser is. But all of them are being forgiven by time.
Yeah.
You know, Hellraiser 2 got pretty bad reviews when it came out, not just from the mainstream press, which we expected, but the genre press as well. But has really been sort of rehabilitated over the decades. And just over the last few years, so has Hellraiser 3. An awful lot of people come out now and say, well, fewer than say it about 2, but there are some who say Hellraiser 3 is and apparently Goran's favorite is Hellraiser 4. So who cares? We're sold now. We're done.
And it's so funny because like I recently kind of revisited the first 4 films, and I actually think that like you were spot on by saying that like maybe as a stand or maybe I shouldn't assume this is what you're saying, but like is as if Hellraiser 3 was maybe titled something else and not necessarily like a Hellraiser movie, that it probably would have maybe worked a little bit better, maybe a little bit divorced. But I think it's a pretty solid movie. Like I think 4 and 4 I think is a lot of fun.
I mean, thank you. For me, 4 is just a mess because I saw it. You know, it's an Alan Smithy movie, and we all know what that means. I mean, just in case you got some viewers who don't know, the Alan Smithy in question in Hellraiser 4 is the great special effects guy, Kevin Yeager, who was just, my God, he was so badly treated and underserved by Miramax that he took his name off. It became an Alan Smithy movie. But again, I mean, thank you. You're not the first person to say recently, actually, I kind of like 4. So I guess, I have to give the Weinsteins their due. Whatever Frankenstein version they cobble together, I guess it sort of works. But it would be difficult. It's difficult for me to be fond of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, given probably all the nightmare production that probably was, I'm sure it's hard to sort of completely separate yourself from that. Sure. But yeah, I really do. It's so funny because there's movies now that I think are pretty fun, kind of ridiculous movies that people are kind of crapping on right now, but I kind of take comfort that I think divorced from enough time, we usually
that's what I'm saying. I think all these, there's a whole weird cycle that movies go through. Like 10 years after they're made, everything looks terrible because all the invisible stuff, just the clothes people wear, suddenly look ridiculous. And whatever slang was cutting edge hip at the time suddenly seems, oh my God, it's like my older brother's friends trying to be. But after 20 years, it's just retro. It's not passe. It's not just out of fashion. It's retro. So after 20 years, it just looks like, oh, this looks exactly like the 80s. As opposed to in the 90s, the 80s looking terrible. And in the 80s, the 70s looking terrible. Everything gets redeemed by time, except possibly the 70s, late 70s, the disco bell bottoms, the famous clip of Cher singing with the Osmond brothers in matching multicolored jumpsuits. I don't know whether that will ever become anything other than lame as fuck, but
it probably was kind of back then.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yes, exactly. It's not like it ever changed. It was, but yeah, there is that weird thing that there's things get dated, and then they just become historical. They just become a period piece, and I guess awful as it is for me to consider, those Hellraiser movies and even Wishmaster, which, as I say, is a mere 25 years old. They have, well, I guess I should be grateful. They've moved through the, oh my God, what are they wearing phase to this nugget of history. That's
yeah. Exactly. Well, and just again, it's really just so cool to get to talk to you about all this stuff, because these movies have been a big part of my life. And
oh no, that's great, man.
yeah,
Can I ask? I mean, it's always rude to ask, but how old were you when you first saw? You obviously you didn't see them in the theaters when they first came out.
I think, gosh, I'm trying to think. I think Hellraiser 1, I think I saw maybe middle school.
Okay, good for you.
So probably like right at that age of starting to figure some stuff out. Sure. And I think that's kind of almost the perfect time.
How old was the movie by? Again, I'm not prying for exactly how old you are, but is this the late 90s you saw them?
Yeah, so it probably would have been about 10-ish years. Yeah.
So it wasn't an old movie yet, but it was.
And then I actually remember Hellraiser 3, like recording that off of like one of the cable channels.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's really excellent. And I mean, just it's so cool to talk to somebody that has such a deep well of like movie knowledge, because I'm such a geek when it comes to that. So
me too. Yeah, like recognizes like, and it's fantastic, as I'm sure you're experiencing it as you get older. Like, I've always had older friends and I've always had younger friends, and well, it's getting to the point where it's difficult to have older friends, but I still have some older friends. But it's that commonality of same tribe, different generation. The commonalities of the stuff we love is what binds us all together, I think. Yes. Anyway, it's been great, Mike. Thank you very much. And keep in touch and let me know.